Okay, I'm reading 1 minute after the hour, so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Scott Jaycox, and I welcome you to our webinar, Demystifying the Journey to Digital Transformation with a Simple Living Roadmap. So I'll be your host today, and also joined by my colleagues, Eric Smith and Kimberly Schaefer. I'll start with some quick introductions. Again, my name is Scott Jaycox, and I lead our ServiceNow practice here at Covestic. I've been delivering services and solutions in the service management space for over 25 years. I started our service management consulting practice back in 2001 here at Covestic and launched our ServiceNow partnership and practice back in 2012. I've personally done a lot of service management focused road mapping and digital transformation work throughout my career with organizations of all sizes and across many industries, and look forward to sharing some applied insights with you today. Eric?
Thank you, sir. Eric Smith. I've been working on ServiceNow for about 10 years. Right now, I run pre-sales here at Covestic. Most of my time working on ServiceNow has been as a solution architect or a business process consultant, mostly around governance, risk, and compliance and IT business management. Thanks, everybody, for being with us today.
Thanks, Eric. Kimberly?
Hello, everybody. I'm Kimberly Schaefer. I am the Senior Director of Service Delivery at Covestic. I've been working with ServiceNow since about 2007, and I've been with Covestic for a little over 4.5 years now. Most of my career has been on the IT leadership side in roles where I was responsible for the overall ServiceNow platform. I've worked with ServiceNow partners, including Covestic, to implement my ServiceNow vision, and I've experienced firsthand the challenge of not having a ServiceNow roadmap. And also on the flip side of that, I've seen really well executed roadmap journeys. So I'm very much looking forward to speaking with you more on this topic based on my experience. Scott?
Awesome, thanks, Kimberly. So just a couple quick housekeeping items. Please do utilize the chat window to submit questions. I'll get to the agenda in a second, but we are going to have a Q&A session at the end, and that's how we'll basically get to your questions. We will send a recording within 24 hours, and you'll also get a copy of these slides via email. On to the agenda. So we will cover basically what is digital transformation, why should you care, provide you some definitions, because often digital transformation is just kind of assumed and not well defined, particularly within context. So we're going to try to provide some help there. Why a simple living roadmap, anatomy of a simple living roadmap, and we'll also provide some examples and samples there. We'll then move on to a call to action and then a Q&A. And we're targeting for this to be approximately 45 minutes. So we'll manage our time accordingly. All right, so let's jump in. What is digital transformation? So the term digital transformation has been thrown around for years, and rarely have I seen an attempt to try to define what that means. I've done some research on the topic, and a common theme is using digital technology, typically some combination of computer software and hardware solutions to transform business processes. And here are the key words: thoroughly and dramatically. So it's not about making work a little bit better or different, typically by implementing technology point solutions, but rethinking work itself as comprehensively as possible. So as a leader in cloud computing, ServiceNow is at the forefront of digital transformation, particularly given today's ServiceNow platform breadth. Eric, you want to talk to some common real world examples?
Yeah, it's been funny for me to watch some of these things migrate from buzzwords that get laughed about to they're here and they're improving your competitors or they're improving your company. And they're real things. Cloud is one really good example. Cloud was for so long joked about just being somebody else's computer. Well, now we're seeing large scale migration to cloud hosting and the scalability that can bring. Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, Amazon AWS. And that's a real thing now. 75% of CIOs have a cloud first initiative in place. Another example, going paperless. Transitioning brick and mortar stores and their processes and into something that's available online and now optimized in social media, integration with social media. And then I think about the ones that are kind of, just a little bit out into the distance, but they're coming up on us, like blockchain. I'm super excited about Ethereum, and that potential to unite a real contract with real payment. And I think that's something we'll be dealing with in the very near future. AI, it's going from just being a smart algorithm to actually having some intelligence and actually using machine learning. And what's really been cool is watching ServiceNow as a leader in cloud computing. They've been at the forefront of these modes of digital transformation, and they've almost given us just-in-time delivery of capabilities to make them real. And I don't think it's going anywhere. McKinsey did a study not that long ago. They had a industry digitization index. I always struggle with that word. And they showed that the US is only about 18%, at really adopting true digital transformation. And they also said that there could be about $13 trillion in global GDP added by 2030, just from embracing this automation and the possibilities that digital transformation can bring. And we're really seeing that the digital maturity is actually kind of low. It's 25%, I think was what McKinsey said. But to put a real point on it, if you think about the number of worldwide sales that go through digital channels, that's about 26%. If you think about how many operations are actually automated, it's in the 30s. If you think about supply chain, only 25% or so of those interactions are digitized. If you think about that in an Amazon, a post-Amazon environment, if you will, that's astounding. But it's also a huge opportunity to actually embrace digital transformation and begin to transform your company.
Good stuff. Thank you, Eric. So let's talk about, what does a non-transform process look like that most of us are probably all too familiar with. So, a common use case, it would be dramatically improved through ServiceNow enabled digital transformation is a fiber cut. So in the traditional scenario, the fiber gets cut. The service provider may not even be aware of this until they start receiving phone calls from customers about voice and data loss. This might initiate some manual investigations to determine the problem, its location, and those impacted. Probably also results in a phone call to a field service repair partner that will roll equipment and human resources. There are probably phone calls between field services and the service provider throughout the repair process, and customers may simply be in the dark or receive, we are working on the problem messages in response to customer inquiries. Eric, anything to add to that?
Yeah, if I can, there's another challenge here, and that's the disparate tools and platforms. Basically lines of business being siloed just because of their embarrassment of riches of platforms they can choose from. And kind of sticking with your example, well, what if engineering, customer care, IT, network operations, field services, and somebody has to go repair that cable? What if they're all using different systems? How much mud does that add to the walk? How much cost does it add? And I think even specific examples like customer service management, you hear in that realm the term effortless experience used a lot. Well, the only effortless experience is the customer not having to make a call and say, hey, my thing's broken. And a unification of the platforms that customer service management, let's say, and the operations group are using can really begin to fix that. And it also, having all these disparate tools, even if at one point they were the industry standard or the preferred provider, there's a lot of risk to it because what it's doing the entire time is adding cost to the organization. And ultimately, it's the customer that suffers. They're the one that gets that increased cost passed on to them. They're the one that experience that extra lead time in getting something fixed. And that's very dangerous in a world where customers have an increasing number of choices.
Yep. Thanks, Eric. So let's just take this same use case a little bit further and talk about what it might look like transformed with ServiceNow. So a digitally transformed business process leveraging ServiceNow means that service provider knows that the service is down in real time, perhaps before it even impacts customers. is able to quickly isolate the cause of the incident and then roll field services while hopefully in parallel proactively notifying customers of the event status, etc., and actual restoration of service in a completely automated fashion with minimal, if any, manual intervention. This results in extraordinary improvements in time to resolution, reduced costs of overhead associated with legacy non-transformed solutions like traditional physical call centers, and results in more satisfied customers. Satisfied customers, or ideally delighted customers, are loyal customers. There's also the potential trickle-down effect on the customer's own business processes. All of this is possible today on the ServiceNow platform, yet many service providers are still operating in silos with point solutions and legacy processes. Eric, do you want to speak to this chart?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I was really glad I was able to talk into including this. This came from a webinar that ServiceNow recently had. It was called Unlocking Value on Your Digital Transformation Journey. I think you can search it up on their website, but there's a lot to unpack here. And some of the high-level notes that aren't captured here, I want you to kind of browse through this, sort of understand it. But some of the high-level notes, they had a study that talked to 15 CIOs and 6 CTOs and tried to understand the steps that could be undertaken to accelerate a digital transformation journey. And they distilled the job of the CIO and the CTO down to 3 basics. And that was be brilliant with the basics, go wider across the company, and elevate to business advisor. And that last one is critically important because IT can be at the forefront of all this transformation that's possible and all the things that can be done. And they're the first to understand it, to quickly grasp it and begin to conceptualize what it could do for the organization. But that goes nowhere if they're not being a business advisor, if they're not reaching out to the leadership team and other lines of business and saying, hey, look at this great new technology that you could be leveraging in this way. Begin to paint them that picture of the possible. And what I really want to see is companies start to arrive at that level 4 column, across velocity, intelligence, and experience, because that's where things really hit a flow state. That's where you're no longer reactive. You're actually addressing customer concerns before they arise. You're maybe even going after new addressable markets before your competitor. It's a really nice place to be.
Yep, I agree. And I think if you look at most of our customers, we often find them at somewhere between a level 2 and a 3. And I like this chart because it gives organizations something to aspire to. And in a minute, we'll talk about the roadmap itself and how we might leverage this as a tool in terms of building out that roadmap. Kimberly, do you want to speak to why so many organizations are stuck here in core IT service management land?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So really speaking from that platform owner perspective, it is just too easy to get stuck with exactly what you see here on this slide. Basic, I'll call it trouble ticketing, problem management, which is limited to reactive root cause analysis, or a service catalog, which is really limited or not taking advantage of any automation at all. Maybe you have a basic CMDB, and maybe that data is not even trusted by the organization yet. Knowledge management, where maybe articles are out of date, not being used, getting stale, or a service portal that's not engaging at all to your customers. And really, as a result of that, you don't have true self-service. Digital transformation with a purchase platform like ServiceNow, it many times starts with ITSM core, but it can't end there. It really can't. You may make some very good incremental improvement with ITSM core as a starting point, but if you stop there, you're really only leveraging a fraction of the power. IT really must be capable of extending digital excellence to every business process across the enterprise. Everything you see here on this slide is foundational. It's an opportunity to be, as we call it, brilliant at the basics. And there are certainly opportunities to continuously improve in each of these areas. However, they're just the tip of the digital transformation iceberg. You really need a way to set these core areas on a continuously improving journey, understanding that they are never going to be done. You're always going to have work to do in these areas. And that must not prevent you from exploring broader opportunities. You need to look past that. Go to the next slide, Scott. All right, so now let's talk about why we sometimes see these digital transformations move too slowly or even get stuck, as we mentioned. And let's start with this core ITSM backlog that we're talking about. And I'm sure many of you are already aware you're constantly going to have this ITSM backlog. People are always going to be requesting new things. I need a new field. I need a new color. I need something basic adding on to what I've already built out in ITSM, or a new catalog item. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed with that volume and just get stuck managing that day-to-day backlog and never extending beyond that. As a platform owner, it's so important to take the time to understand how ServiceNow can better support your company's vision and objectives outside of your current use cases, extending beyond that backlog and what you already have in production. On that front, we've come to realize that, and have many customers that have come to realize that they can either outsource their ITSM backlog to a service provider like Covestic, or some of them have decided to focus on their core ITSM backlog and themselves, while bringing in a partner like Covestic to focus on helping build out that vision and the roadmap itself, and executing on the projects that will expand the platform footprint, maybe extending into ITOM or SecOps or GRC, for example. Either way, you need to figure out a strategy for keeping the lights on, managing that backlog, while also executing to a roadmap. The entry point into an organization is commonly through IT, so it does stand to reason that sponsorship and product ownership often resides in IT, and that's been my experience as well. But as you're looking to expand on a broader transformational journey, you're going to want to start to attract other sponsors beyond IT, maybe the PMO, HR, employee relations, engineering, other organizations, and you really need to consider elevating that sponsorship outside of IT, or at least at a minimum establishing some sort of steering committee with representation from each organization. For the same reasons that platform ownership is often inside of IT, too many people think of ServiceNow and pigeonhole it as just an IT tool, and they have trouble thinking beyond IT use cases. In a few minutes, we're going to talk about a use case of leveraging ServiceNow to basically replace a company's intranet. And many people would not even think about ServiceNow for this use case. So in order for something like this to be successful, we have to educate and involve the entire organization. And then I guess lastly, digital transformation really does require deliberate planning, regular reviews of progress, and of course, course correction where you need to, continuous improvement of your roadmap, and then organization-wide support to be successful. Eric, I'll turn it back over to you to talk about the challenges of platform breadth, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one thing, it's like you said, that ServiceNow has deep roots in IT, and it's been doing it so well for so long that it can be perceived as IT only. You know, this platform slide here, a quick representation of all the things that ServiceNow can do. Man, this is comforting to me. It's having lived ServiceNow for 10 years. I love all these interrelations, but I can understand how as a customer it can be daunting. It can be an embarrassment of riches. You can not quite know where to start. And bluntly, what we see commonly in organizations is that they're using pure play solutions, like say Archer for GRC or Service Cloud for customer service. And that's great, but there's a problem with that. And it's all about missed opportunity and unnecessary cost and complexity. There's all kinds of better together stories that I could tell you for days throughout this oval that you're seeing. You know, let's just think about GRC for just a moment. So you have all these external frameworks and regulations that you have to comply with, and you have to certify that you are complying with the individual controls. And, you know, in a point solution for GRC that it doesn't understand your environment, it doesn't have your, say, services and applications mapped out, you're going to be doing a lot of manual tasking, and those tasks are going to bounce from one person to another. With ServiceNow, you can get very targeted if you have a good configuration management database and get that control in the hands of the exact right person who can certify, yes, this server does not have PII, and here's how we're certifying that it's protected, or security operations. There again, a lot of great monitoring tools out there. ServiceNow doesn't try to replace those, but how do you actually take action on a vulnerability if you've identified it in your organization. Even if you have, where does that tasking go first? Well, with ServiceNow, you don't have to think about that anymore. It can help you identify the vulnerabilities. It can listen to your scanning tools. It can point out things that are happening. It can automate that tasking. And oh, by the way, if there's an IP you're getting attacked from, it can right click and shut that down temporarily while you get it figured out. There's a lot of those better together type stories that you're missing out on. But I'm not trying to scare anybody or daunt anyone or, sell you on taking on the whole platform, because you don't have to all at once. Establish your roadmap, establish what's most important to your organization that ServiceNow can do, get those in the first phases of your roadmap. But I hope that you see the opportunity to align various aspects of the platform to real digital transformation in your organization. So, I'm giving you a lot to think about. We're giving you a lot to think about, especially with the roadmap. And, what you don't want to do is let perfection get in the way of good enough. You have to begin to take action. Most digital transformation roadmap white papers and webinars, they want you to capture a lot of specific data points, baselines, benchmarks, maturity indices, pain measurements, those kinds of things. And that's all great. It is telling, it is instructive. Just getting those data points is a good exercise because it prompts conversation across the business. But don't let all that get in the way, overwhelm you, and definitely don't let it slow you down. Just start simple. You see a lot of what's here, what's your vision, what's your mission? These are easy questions to ask, open-ended, both within IT and your organization with your leadership team. And I would encourage you to ask all of these questions, have the conversation, gather the simple data points, and then the one that I want to add is why. I think why can be a very informative question. Not just why do we do this way, or why does that process need to stay that way? Those kinds of easy whys, but also why are we doing all this? What is important to our organization? What is important for our customers to perceive? What is the level of service we want to promise to our internal customers, and begin to take action on that. I think that can go a long way to start informing your digital transformation roadmap.
All right, thanks, Eric. So let's start talking about how we do this in a simplified manner. So step one, establish distinct ownership. I'm seeing more and more success, however, in doing this at least somewhat by committee. So there should still be a distinct and empowered owner, but that owner can chair a steering committee with representation from across the organization. This is an opportunity to break down those silos, educate, and collaborate. Next, audit your entitlements. You may be surprised by the fact that you aren't using everything you already pay for, and some of those things might map to real-world challenges and opportunities. Next, audit your next release capabilities. So upcoming capability and functionality in terms of the next ServiceNow platform release, it may already align to your entitlements. It might give you extra value in potentially digital transformation alignment at no cost. I like this next one, and it's aggressively hunt for organizational ROI. So basically what that means is anytime you can map capabilities to cost savings, it's going to be compelling to the leadership team, and it's going to be compelling to the leadership team all the way to the top. So for example, orchestration and employee onboarding and offboarding automation, it will significantly improve employee productivity while lowering risk. Capabilities like virtual agent can free up service desks and call centers to be more proactive, driving down organizational costs and the impacts of incidents and case volumes. This next one is often overlooked as well. Find the organizational initiative enablers, and don't do it with your ServiceNow blinders on. Just look at what problems your organization is trying to solve and try to figure out, what does that mean in terms of your overall digital transformation journey, and what might that mean in terms of ServiceNow's role in that as well. So for example, the COVID-19 situation, it's generated brand new needs for how to return employees to the workplace safely. ServiceNow has recently released the Safe Workplace suite of applications on the platform that do exactly this. So digital transformation often requires a catalyst, and this is probably exactly the catalyst inside many organizations today. Next, draft a simple living roadmap. I'll provide an example of that and talk through that in a moment. Establish simple governance around that. So just keep in mind, this is for the roadmap to be basically, I guess, respected across the organization. It needs to be continuously refreshed. And this can be done pretty simply. You can do a quarterly meeting, for example, with the steering committee, where you dust off the roadmap, audit it, just kind of say, hey, how did we do against the plan in terms of the last phase? Let's look at the actual outcomes and certainly celebrate those. And then look at the new organizational initiatives and new platform capability and adjust the roadmap accordingly. Things pop up like the COVID situation. Things pop up like new capabilities being brought to the next platform release. So if you can leverage that simple governance process, even if it's, again, via something like a steering committee, you can stay on top of all those moving pieces and make wise business decisions and make sure that they're fresh. Finally, the roadmap should be your primary vehicle for budgeting for the next fiscal cycle. If you've got your entire organization and not just IT, your entire organization on board with the roadmap, budget accordingly and go to the well once so you can spend the next fiscal cycle focused on execution and not justification. All right, so why roadmap? Visibility. Elevate as the trusted innovator to your leadership team and even your C-suite. Collaboration. Organizational change management 101 is based on engaging the organization in the solution, not trying to unilaterally bulldoze a path. The roadmap approach, if done collaboratively and with representation across the organization, will inherently be more successful. Planning and prioritization. Without a roadmap, you're not likely addressing opportunities in the right order. With good inputs into the roadmap and good process around ideation and demand management, you're much more likely to be doing the right things in the right order and achieving measurable outcomes. And then again, back to budgeting. The successful roadmap should be your primary means of seeking and receiving funding for your ServiceNow or any other enabled digital transformation efforts. Okay, Eric, why now?
Yeah. So, look, the pandemic, it's made us more aware of our need to adopt some new capabilities, to be flexible, and it's proven out how valuable planning ahead can be. And you know, guys, I know this is a very scary time for a lot of organizations and a lot of individuals, but bluntly, transformation doesn't occur without a catalyst. And if there was ever a catalyst, so far this year has been it. Yes, it's a scary time. Yes, there's a lot of risk, but I think that you have to embrace it as an opportunity to improve. And I think that having a roadmap can enable that. I honestly think ServiceNow in a lot of ways can enable that, enable this to be a time of improvement. You know, one of the ones that sticks out to me is very much near and dear to my heart. It's been my #1 work passion item, you know, for a significant portion of my career, and that's keeping employees engaged and connected. This is their second family, and a lot of them don't have that second family anymore beyond webinars or, you know, occasional screen share or chat or something like that. Think about ways to keep your employees engaged and connected and keep them feeling that sense of family. Think about ways to support operations in new ways. Think about synergies that didn't have to exist before, like say HR having to talk to sanitation about a safe come back to work. Has this person's workstation been sanitized? Well, that's not just a point thing. There's going to be future health scares and things of that nature where there could be needs for that connection. Think those through. Think through other synergies within your business. Look at the ways you prioritize risk. Look at the way you quantify your risks. Look at what other threat actors could be out there that you haven't considered yet. I hate to say it, but I do spend a lot of time in the cybersecurity realm, and there's a lot of threat actors that are looking at this as an opportunity. When you suddenly have a lot of folks working remotely, well, they're a little more they're a little more susceptible to that phishing email or that social engineering call to try to get some information on your organization. Try to stay ahead of that. Think about how artificial intelligence, portal, automated workflows, on-demand services, all these things can begin to not just improve your connectedness as a company during this time, but what can they do for you in the future? The companies that are prepared for this, the companies that are preparing for this with digital solutions, and the ones that have invested in the technology, they're going to come out of this at a very real advantage. This is an opportunity to unlock your remote production. That's not going away, guys. That was going to happen anyway. This just accelerated it. But this is a very real opportunity to get really good at it, double down, and fuel innovation around how you get the most out of your folks working remotely. Make sure that you have really good flow of communication. This is something that ServiceNow can help a lot with. It is very good as a single central hub of action. I think I've rambled enough on that one, Scott. I do want to point out that just continuous improvement. That's another one that I think falls off sometimes. Is have a spot in your process, have a spot in your roadmap for looking back at what you've just done and how you might be able to do it better.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And I think that simple governance process that I spoke about is exactly that opportunity. It's almost like running a project retrospective. Every time you wrap up a phase, you kind of say, hey, how did we do in the last phase, and how might we make some changes so that the next phase goes even more smoothly. So you're not necessarily just looking at new organizational need or new platform capability. You're also looking at your own internal processes and how you did.
Yep.
All right, good stuff. So let's get into sort of the practical aspects of a simple roadmap. We've got a sample here. We typically build these simple roadmaps using the Office timeline plugin for PowerPoint. So, I mean, it's not super sophisticated, but it's quick and easy. It's very simple to change or update. You're not having to move lines and blocks around. You actually do it in a chart that's part of the plugin. The key really is to show phases that are reasonable, set the expectation that things like CMDB and even incident management, they're going to be journeys unto themselves. I hate to see something like CMDB dropped into a single phase, for example. That's going to evolve and change over many phases. And make sure that solid business outcomes are identified every step of the way, and you see those depicted at the bottom here. So in this example, the other thing that you'll hopefully take note of is you see those themes from the ServiceNow study on digital transformation that I think Eric referenced earlier. And be brilliant on the basics, go wider across the company, elevate to business advisor. All those themes are reflected here. So notice, we're getting foundational things that are necessary, but with real outcomes done earlier in the program, and then going wider and into the business later in the program, where we see concepts like improving our net promoter score relevant to achieving excellence in external customer perception of our business. Eric, anything to add here?
Yeah, definitely. I really want to double down on that message of the three basics with that third one, elevate yourself to business advisor. I think that the roadmap is fantastic and necessary in my analysis, but you have to speak to outcomes. I think that in IT, a lot of times we focus on feature set, we focus on solutions to problems, going for the easiest solution possible. And because we're on the front lines and we see, hey, this is broke, we fix. But you have to keep in mind that your leadership, particularly the C-suite, they're thinking in different terms. They're thinking in terms of agility, cost reduction, business value creation, innovation, increasing revenue, finding new addressable markets. And I think that you have to tie the outcomes from your roadmap to things that the leadership team cares about and understands.
Yep, good stuff. So the other thing that I want you to hopefully take note of here is it's also a lot of roadmaps that we see they can be just hyper complicated because you're trying to do too much on a single page. So I think you certainly do want to tell the big picture story on a single page, and that's what we've attempted to do in our example. But then provide drill down. So you can go deep and substantiate the level of effort for each phase as needed. So let the reader sort of peel back the onion as they see fit. So we typically embed these in a PowerPoint where it starts with the primary business objectives, problems we're trying to solve for, outcomes expected, then the big picture roadmap, and then drill down slides like these for each phase. There are also other, I guess, vantage points to consider. So it can be really helpful to provide basically a roadmap inside the roadmap. So provide that transformative view of individual project streams. So in this example, this is a ServiceNow slide around employee experience, noting that elevating employee and customer experience is a common CIO top 5 priority. So let's assume that that is a top, in priority in your organization. How might ServiceNow underpin and enable that objective? So in this specific example, we're showing a digital transformation of employee experience, starting with ServiceNow and other point service portals, being consolidated into a single portal in phase 1, moving to an enterprise portal that now starts to integrate content and capability from third-party solutions and repositories like SharePoint and ERP in phase 2, and then finally culminating in a true enterprise intranet experience where we are building on phases 1 and 2, but also layering in things like targeted content delivery, campaigns, analytics, social, communities, federated search, and so on. So it's kind of back to kind of the definition of digital transformation, transform business processes thoroughly and dramatically. And I think this is a good example of exactly that. And I think Kimberly raised earlier on, how many organizations would have even previously thought of ServiceNow as potentially replacing and certainly enriching, I guess, the employee experience via the intranet. Okay, let's move on to a call to action. So first, be a vocal champion for roadmap development inside your organization and importantly, across your peer organizations. So there are lots of resources in this space, including this webinar that can be shared to help educate and inspire. Make sure that ServiceNow is a big part of the digital transformation conversation inside your organization. So again, ServiceNow may be marginalized as an IT-only solution. Get the word out that not only can ServiceNow handle many more things like external customer service with CSM, engineering, HR, GRC, SecOps, but it can do much better than the traditional market leaders due to the operating together and in concert on a common platform. I think Eric referenced the better together story earlier. It's super powerful on the ServiceNow platform where all of these capabilities are integrated and talking with each other. Encourage elevated platform ownership. Consider a distributed model where there is representation across your organization and your ServiceNow and digital transformation steering teams. You've got to get these other organizations engaged, allow them to be part of the solution. And then finally, start simple, keep it simple, but start now. Okay, so I will stop rambling and open for questions. So let me look through here. So and I'll direct these to either myself or you, Kimberly, or you, Eric. Our company has basically frozen non-essential IT spend for the rest of FY20, and this impacts our ServiceNow budget as well. tips on getting the company to pay attention to our ServiceNow roadmap when all focus is on cutting costs and basically surviving the current business climate. So let me, if I can do this without it being too disruptive, try to go back a few slides. So this one. So basically what I would be advocating in this situation, so, we're seeing this with a lot of organizations. You may have kind of frozen IT spend based on the business climate. I would kind of jump to number 5. And you start kind of asking the question, why are we stopping the IT spend? It's typically, let's just take retail, for example. Retail, obviously, especially traditional retail, brick and mortar, has been especially hit hard by the COVID situation. So if our revenue stream has been disrupted, then obviously we want to see what we can do to cut costs, and IT is often a place that we look. However, how might ServiceNow help reverse the trend? So we've already talked about the safe workplace apps. So if you can speed up the return of your workforce, and obviously, particularly in a space like retail or hospitality, that's going to speed up your return to revenue positive. But there are other considerations. It doesn't have to be necessarily directly related to, for example, those COVID apps. What about employee onboarding and employee offboarding? If the organization has already experienced the pain of closing down operations and potentially furloughing employees, you know how difficult it was to offboard those employees and making sure that you're adhering to your security requirements and things like that. Well, how do we make sure that when we reverse that trend and we bring those furloughed employees back and we have to hire net new employees and train net new employees, that we do that as quickly as possible so that we can return to that revenue positive situation as quickly as possible? Again, employee onboarding and offboarding. Call centers, traditional call centers have had to go virtual or look for ways to go virtual. There's multiple ways that ServiceNow can support that. So I think you kind of look at sort of what the root drivers of that budget situation is within IT, and you may take your existing roadmap and you may have to ball it up and throw it in the garbage can and start fresh, but start fresh based on the new business climate. And by doing that, not only are you solving real business problems for your organization, again, you're really starting to elevate ServiceNow in the business conversation. So I'll leave it at that. Let's see. Here's another, and let me do a quick time check. We've got a couple more minutes. We'll go ahead and get at least one more question in. So we have attempted to get other orgs interested in ServiceNow, but they are already heavily invested in their own tools in areas like HR and our engineering groups that do product development. We may look into some integrations in those areas, but so far they don't have a ton of interest. How have you seen other companies overcome this? And Kimberly, this sounds like right up your alley.
Sure, Scott. Honestly, the best way to probably approach this is to first figure out what that business case looks like. What are the problems with the way things are? You have to understand that first before you can improve anything. And then identify those improvement opportunities, and then you can start to craft the roadmap like we've talked about and plan to consolidate on the platform. I think being able to clearly demonstrate and articulate why having disparate tools is not the ideal state, and provide a vision of what things could look like on a common platform is key. And again, Eric talked a little bit about how we present this, and speaking in terms of functions versus business value. You really need to tie things to the outcomes that the leadership team cares about. So thinking about both functional gains, but also financial impact, like licensing before and after, maintenance and support costs with all the tools that you have today versus what tomorrow could look like. I guess the other thing I could say is really make sure you're thinking in digital transformation themes. You need to consider maybe even extreme business process transformation. It's very easy to take what you're doing on 5 different platforms and just put it onto ServiceNow. That lift and shift is probably not going to be the best way. Maybe your customer support team could do a lot more than simple triage if they had access to, let's say, engineering data. So how would their process change? How would their world change a little bit if they had access to that data? So you have to think through things like that and how your process is going to change potentially. And I guess at the start of this too, think about your business case and your roadmap doesn't have to be super thorough and complex at first. You just really want to paint that picture and get somebody behind it, get somebody sponsoring it. Maybe you get your CIO interested enough where he's willing to fund somebody to come in and help do that more thorough analysis with you. And that's kind of the first baby step. Maybe that business case gets the COO or other organizations interested because it supports a cause other than just the IT cause or just the one cause. It's really something the entire organization can rally around. So you have to make it bigger, but you have to really focus on outcomes that the leadership team cares about.
Good stuff. Thanks, Kimberly. So I see we still have a lot of people hanging on here. So let me go ahead and take one more question. It looks like this one's kind of related to this last one, but it's a slightly different spin. Eric, just to be fair, I think I'll have you take this one. So we have already gotten most of our organizations on board with ServiceNow, mostly through use of the service catalog. The problem isn't really getting them on board. It's the fact that we still have so much to do around ITSM and ITOM for IT before we are going to have the bandwidth and focus to address their needs. And our company is reluctant to engage ServiceNow or partners for this kind of work for budget reasons, and because we find we do a better job of owning the application after go live if we implement them. I'm not sure this webinar helped me with that problem. So Eric, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, I get it, and there's a lot there. So let me do my best to kind of break this down into chunks. But look, I've been working with ServiceNow customers for a very long time now, and I've seen this challenge. I get it. I've heard it before. I feel your pain. Particularly with larger companies that have decided to invest in their own ServiceNow resources in-house. I really have to call back to the roadmap. Inherently, it's a timeline. It's going to help you structure these decisions. So when you're rallying the organization around the what and the how, you can also address the sequence and when things need to happen. So things don't just happen at random or based on who's crying the loudest, but on compelling business need. That's what it has to come back to. I'll give you an example. So for GRC, you might have to either sunset the tool you're using or lock yourself into 3 more years. Let's say, on out to 2024, what have you. In these cases, you not only want to include the business outcomes for each phase of this roadmap that we're talking about, but also a what if analysis and give the impacts of not doing these things. I think that can help you get support. The timing of the sequence, it has to be supported by a resource plan. That's going to be very useful for leadership. What's it going to take human-wise to execute on the roadmap? And I know we didn't really get to touch on that today, but it's going to be an important aspect of budgeting. Right along with the roadmap, you're going to have to do that. And oh, by the way, if you matter-of-factly include third-party spend for professional services required to achieve the timeline, well, now you're putting the ball in the leadership team's court. They have to decide, well, do we reprioritize the roadmap? Do we bump out the timeline? I'd love to see that be more planful farther out. Or, maybe we have to bring in third parties. It can help you make that case. It can help you help the leadership team arrive at the conclusion, make that decision themselves. But the key is to get all these decisions made as part of your fiscal year budgeting cycle. You have to be mindful of that, and don't get yourself locked into expectations that can't be met just because you don't have the resources. Don't let yourself get locked into licensing for platforms you don't love, those kinds of things. And that's what's going to help. That's what's going to help provide comfort to the organization that your internal team is going to be able to do these things and take care of them, the care and feeding after these things actually go live. But as far as the challenge of having the bandwidth and being capable of it, well, the capability really comes down to training, knowledge transfer, being mindful and planful there. But also you can consider co-implementation. Bring in a partner just to help you out with some of it, if that's what your budget allows, or bring in that partner to really knock down the wall for you. And I think you can begin to bake in things like extended post-go-live support into that roadmap to say, hey, we want to do this, but we're also going to have this little sidecar of some additional help. And then lastly, I think of a really good book out there by Gene Kim, Phoenix Project, and one of the characters in the book talks about there's only 4 types of work. There's unplanned, think incidents. There's planned, think changes. There's IT projects, and there's business projects, and only one of those moves the needle. If you undertake a digital transformation journey, you begin to get good enough, automated enough, consistent enough at those unplanned and planned levels of work, and sometimes the IT projects as well, and some of them actually find themselves not as necessary. And then you begin to focus on things that are making the business more successful. And I promise you, you will get more support from your leadership team for either training up the folks you already have in-house or going out and getting help from an organization like ours.
All right, good stuff. Thank you, Eric. So we will go ahead and wrap up. Great questions. That concludes our presentation. If what you saw here today resonated with you, whether you're an existing ServiceNow customer, new to the platform, or newly embarked on your digital transformation journey, please be sure to watch for an email from us within the next 24 hours. Like I said earlier, it will contain a link to where you can download a copy of today's recording. Thank you again for your time and have a great day. Take care.